What makes a person seriously well read? Hello, welcome to my channel. Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and today I'm doing the tag, the seriously well-read tag. This was created by Randy, the literate Texan. Randy has created a seriously well-read book club. I will provide some video links in the description of this video in case you want to check out his seriously well-read book club. He is reading The Hobbit, Pride and Prejudice, The Great Gatsby, Jane Eyre, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, The Odyssey, Dracula, The Count of Monte Cristo, A Christmas Carol, To Kill a Mockingbird, Crime and Punishment, and 1984. Those are some seriously good books. I'm going to have to join him for at least a few of those books. But to celebrate his book club, Randy created this tag. This is the seriously well-read tag, and it has 10 questions about what it means to be a seriously well-read reader. Let me get on with it. Question number 1. What book made you take reading seriously? I think I was in 6th grade, and in the basement of my house, I found a book that belonged to either my brother or my father. It was The Tomb and Other Tales by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, if you look at that cover, that split face held together with a lock and bats flying out, how could I resist reading that book? It was a little too advanced for me at 6th grade, but I do remember reading each short story. Each short story took me about 2 nights to complete because I was still a struggling reader in the 6th grade. And I remember that my teacher was a little disappointed that I was reading this horror book, horror stories. And she tried to give me a book. After I finished The Tomb, I don't remember the title. I don't remember the author. I do remember it was about a Wagons West adventure. And there was a little boy, probably 10 years old. And this Wagons West were besieged by naughty, wicked, evil American Indians. Now, of course, you could not get away with that nowadays. I read this book. It would have been the mid-70s, maybe 77. And the book was old, probably 30 years old, maybe 40 years old. And I don't remember the author or the title. I would kind of like to find it again and read it again to see if my older self disapproved of this Wagons West adventure as much as my younger self disapproved. Because what's a little boy on Wagons West saving the day? And little boys, in reality, never save the day compared with horror stories. So really, The Tomb and Other Tales really got me started reading. Question number 2. What book did you pretend to understand? Be honest. Well, a few years ago, I read Foster by Claire Keegan. This novel is very popular with a lot of friends and fellow booktubers. It becomes, or they say it is, one of their favorite books. But I read this book, and I just sort of shrugged my shoulders and going, what's the big deal about this book? This book was in part beautifully written. It is the story of a family who take in a temporary orphan, or I shouldn't say orphan, I should say that the girl's mother is a little too busy with life and other children to take care of this young child. So her relatives take in the child. I can't remember exactly the relationship, but it's all about these older couple raising this young child and the young child blossoming. And again, I just did not understand the story. I understood the words. I understood the characters. I understood what they were doing. I just did not understand the appeal of the story. And that's a fault that belongs entirely to me. Stories of families. Stories of family that love their family relationships, their mothers, their sisters, their brothers, whatever. Those kind of stories just don't appeal to me. I fail to understand why people take those books seriously. And again, that's a fault that belongs entirely to me. So I just did not understand Foster by Claire Keegan. Question number 3. Which 3 books are on your personal required reading list? Let's start with Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. This was Thomas Hardy's last novel, and this was a scandalous book when it was published. There was a hue and cry. They called it obscene. They called it irreligious. It is the story of Jude. He is an orphan. He is being raised in a small town in England, and he wants to join the priesthood, the study. But as a poor orphan, that's just not in his future. And he is guided along to become a stone carver, a solid reputation back then, but he still has aspirations for the priesthood. He tries to teach himself some Latin, teach himself some Greek, but he's never going to advance beyond his place in life, a place in life that was assigned to him by other people. He also has a disastrous marriage that breaks up, and then he falls in love with someone else, but he can't really be with her because he's already married. And then there comes this hue and cry of this relationship between Jude and Sue, because, listen to this, they're not married. They're having sexual relationships. Yeah, and I just understand Jude. I understand his aspirations to be something more than what he is and never achieving it. Many people call Thomas Hardy relentlessly depressing. And I guess, yes, that's true. But for some reason, this book just utterly fascinates me, and I love it to pieces. The Stranger by Albert Camus. I first read this book when I was a sophomore at the University of Maryland. I was studying English literature, and one of the classes we had to take was a study or a class on how to study books. And each student had to pick out a book to read, with up to the student to choose the book. I had initially tried to pick The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner, and the professor says, pick a different book. That Sound and the Fury is too difficult for you. And yeah, it would have been too difficult for a sophomore, but I picked The Stranger by Albert Camus. And this book has greatly influenced me ever since then. It is the story of an Algerian man whose mother dies, and he goes out to her funeral. He does not cry at his mother's funeral because he did not have that sort of relationship with his mother where he felt the need to cry over her death. And then he goes back to his town in Algeria. He hooks up with a beautiful young lady. They have a nice sexual relationship. And then there is some trouble where Marceau, the main character, the narrator, is on the beach. He happens to have a gun in his pocket, and there is an Arab with a knife. The Arab has already cut someone Marceau knew, and when Marceau and this Arab are on the beach alone, he decides he better kill this Arab. And then it descends from there, because at this time, a white French Algerian would not have had much legal trouble killing an Arab in Algeria. But Marceau didn't cry at his mother's funeral. Therefore, Marceau is an evil man, or a wicked man, or an immoral man, deserving of public execution. And this novel truly moved me. I learned 3 things from this novel. 1, it's okay not to believe in God. 2, you are responsible for your own actions in your life. And 3, nobody has the right to judge you for who you are. One of my favorite novels of all time. A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. This is a comedy. It is about Ignatius J. Riley. He is a graduate of medieval studies. He is living in New Orleans with his mother because he does not have a job. He is incredibly opinionated. He is obese. He is belligerent to everyone he meets. And he is convinced that he is an absolute genius in this world. He is writing a thesis on Boethius, the medieval Latin philosopher. And then things happen where Ignatius has to get a job and go out and encounter the world that he detests. And it is absolutely hilarious. There are so many side characters in this book that just have this perfect resonance of the time. This book was actually written in the 60s and not published until the 80s. Long, complicated story, but it is a hilarious book. But Ignatius O'Reilly, he is not O'Reilly, he's just Riley. He is so detestable. He is over the top detestable in his opinions, in his actions, that many people just cannot gel with this book. But Ignatius is supposed to be that way. He is supposed to be so dislikable that he's likable. Because oddly enough, this man, so filled with ignorance of the world, so belligerent, so opinionated, actually makes it a better place for the side characters. It is wonderful in its own way. But you really have to put up with Ignatius, this horrible man that you will learn to love. Question number 4. What author have you been avoiding? Jane Austen. A few years ago, I listened to the audiobook of Jane Austen, and I was very nonplussed. I just didn't get this book. I understood the basics of the story, but I did not understand its appeal. I had watched the movie version about 15 years ago with my wife because it was one of her favorite movies. And again, the movie version nonplussed me. I just did not understand it. But then I never wanted to read another Jane Austen book again. However, I was challenged in 2025 by Too Tight Lautrec to read Emma by Jane Austen. So this coming July, for Jane Austen July, I will be trying Emma. I'm going to try to read this book. Will I learn to appreciate Jane Austen? Because everyone says that Jane Austen is very witty, very subtle, and wonderful. I did not get that from the audiobook of Persuasion. Maybe I will get that from Emma. I know I was talking to my wife about this. She says, why read Emma? Why not read Pride and Prejudice? Because Pride and Prejudice is supposedly Jane Austen's best book. And I said, because Too Tight Lautrec double dared me to read Emma. And my wife replied, well, Emma's just not a very likable character, or not as likable as her other characters. And I said, maybe I will like her more for being dislikable. Who knows? I will find out in July. But Jane Austen is just one author I really have been avoiding, even though she's super popular with many other booktubers. Question number 5. What's the hardest book you've ever finished? This is going to be kind of a cliche, because I think this is going to be the answer for a number of people doing this tag. And this is, of course, Ulysses by James Joyce. About 20 years ago, I listened to the audiobook while commuting to work. I kind of liked it, but this is not a book that you will gather everything you need to just by listening to the audiobook while commuting to work. Was it 2022 or was it 2021? I joined a group to read Ulysses. We named ourselves the Ulysses Six, and we spent 2 months going through Ulysses together. It was one of the best reading experiences of my life because we had 6 people discussing this book. And this book is very complicated. It is not an ordinary novel by any stretch of the imagination. And you do need to throw ideas of what you're reading in this book to other minds and see what they say. So it was a great and fabulous reading experience. I read this hardcover book. I also listened to the audiobook while reading because it gave me the Irish voice in the text, which I would have missed just reading it. But this was the hardest book that I ever finished. Question number 6. What's a book that changed how you read? I'm not sure I can answer this question. I don't think a book has changed the way I read. I suppose a lot of people are going to be mentioning How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. I have not read Adler's book. I have heard some examples from that book, such as Adler suggesting that readers have a conversation with the book, to write comments in the margins of the book. That makes a dialogue in Adler's mind. I will never annotate a book, even if you hold a gun to my head. So I disagree with Adler. So Adler has not changed the way I read a book, and I don't know of any other book that has. Question number 7. Quality versus quantity. Would you rather read 100 good books in a year or 10 great books? Well, that's sort of another difficult question. I read about 200 books per year between print, digital, and audio, and at least 100 books out of that 200 are usually pretty good. And about 10 may be great. So I'm actually kind of doing both already because that's all I do. I basically read and take care of my cats and go for walks. But if you had to make me choose, I would probably choose to read 100 good books rather than 10 great books because I'm getting old. I don't necessarily need the great books anymore, and good books may be good enough just in and of themselves. Question number 8. Which genre are you embarrassed to say you have not read? I think in my adult life, I have read at least one, maybe two books in just about every genre. Now, there are genres that I don't read a lot. I don't read a lot of romance, but I do read some. But I really, of all the genres, don't like young adult. It is a genre that I just don't understand. Why would an adult deliberately choose to read a book for someone younger? Of course, everyone goes through that young adult phase to get into adulthood, but I have no particular nostalgia about growing up. When I was growing up, I wanted to be an adult. As an adult, I have no desire to relive my young adult days. Now, obviously, when you're young, you may not have the reading skills to fully read an adult book. And you do that, and you do your reading through young adult books. Even though I made it through my young adult phase without reading young adult books, because that genre really did not exist back in the late 70s and early 80s. But again, why would people want to read this if you're an adult? Now, some people really do like this genre as adults, and that's your option. I'm not saying you're wrong, but for me, I just don't gel with it. I don't understand it. I'm just going to skip over all the young adult books for the most part. Question number 9. Which book do you think people misread? I'm going to go with Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. This novel is believed by many readers to be a sex novel, to be a pornographic novel, to be an obscene novel about pedophilia. And it's not. The main narrator, Humbert, is a sexual predator. Very true. He preys on young girls. And that in itself just turns so many people off of this book that they cannot overlook that Humbert is a criminal. He's a pedophile. He is an abuser of children. And that's all that they see in this book. They do not understand that Vladimir Nabokov was not a child abuser in and of himself. He said he did not even know any young girls. This is a novel about the American dream, his version of the American dream, and what he thought of how it was wrong, because he was a Russian immigrant to the United States, and he viewed the United States in ways that natives do not. And this book contains no graphic sexual scenes, but the fact that the narrator, Humbert, is charming, he's convincing, he lulls the reader into his way of life and tries to convince him that he is not the bad guy, but he is the bad guy if you read this book correctly. And so many people refuse to read this book because they believe they're going to be entering into something disgusting. It's not disgusting in that way. It is a magnificent American novel that all serious readers should pick up and read someday. Question number 10. What does seriously well-read mean to you? I'm not sure there's a one answer I can give. Someone can be seriously well-read in a particular genre. Let's just suppose there are readers out there who read almost exclusively science fiction. They can be seriously well-read in science fiction. You can have other readers who are seriously well-read in mystery, in horror, in romance, in historical fiction, in Victorian fiction. You can be seriously well-read in any of those categories, with only touching slightly other categories. But for me, when I say seriously well-read, I like to think of a reader who touches just a little bit of everything. All those categories that I mentioned, a seriously well-read reader will be convergent at least on the main books in those categories, maybe some lesser ones, and is curious to explore more. As I said earlier in this video, I don't think there is a genre that I have not read at least one book in. Maybe middle grade fiction is the one area that I have not read anything as an adult. But other than that, I think I've read all genres a little bit. And that's what a seriously well-read reader is going to do. They are going to explore all the genres and also across time. Many contemporary readers just focus on contemporary books. They may occasionally go back to the Victorian age or the Renaissance or the medieval literature or classical literature of ancient Rome and Greece. But the seriously well reader will cover all time and all genres. And that's what I like to do. But then again, it has its disadvantages, because when I talk to a seriously well reader in, let's just say, mystery fiction, they're going to have so much more knowledge of mysteries than I will ever get, because a lot of my time is explored reading things other than mysteries. So they are more seriously well read in mystery than I am. Oh well, I'll just have to live with that disadvantage. Okay, that is the end of the 10 prompts in this tag. I am not going to tag anyone specifically, but do you think you're a seriously well-read reader? If you do, and you have not done this tag, I encourage you, one, check out Randy's videos in the description of my video and see if you want to join his seriously well-read book club. And second, do this tag yourself, because your answers are going to be completely different from mine. Thank you so much for watching, and keep on reading.